Hello everyone, welcome to Voting Trend Poll Analysis for August 26th. My name is Dave Trotter. Thank you very much for joining me. Currently, I am in Paris, France. I'm going to be here for about the next 4 weeks, but then I'll get back to Illinois where I will be doing everything then. But I was on vacation. I am going to be doing a video every day where we're going to be looking at the polls, not just the nationwide polls, but also some local polls, state level polls for both the presidency and the Senate, and maybe some congressional polls that they come out as well, and yeah, see what happens. But yeah, so we're going to be looking at the polls. There are a few interesting polls that came out over the weekend, and we had one drop this morning in the Utah U.S. Senate race, which will be no surprise to anyone. But there was one poll, one big poll that came out, in which Kamala Harris has 75% of the vote. Now, this is a huge poll where Donald Trump only has 16% support in this poll. And then I think undecided here, we have it 8%. But the problem with this poll is that it's a poll of Japanese. Okay, so the Japanese obviously want Kamala Harris. I wish we could have those votes because as a Kamala Harris supporter, 75% would be great. But I just saw this as I was analyzing the polls and thought it'd be funny to throw it up here. But let's go ahead and look at some polls. So one poll that did come out was by, I think it's called Fairleigh Dickinson University. I'm not familiar with their work at all. But in this poll, we see that Kamala Harris has a 7% lead. Now, this poll was done before the convention. It was not done during or after the convention. So this is a pre-convention poll, which would be quite high nationally for Kamala Harris. But there are some things that we need to pick apart in this poll because it's not, the distribution doesn't look that great in some of the demographics. Some it does, but in others it doesn't. It has 801 registered voters as its universe, and that's pretty good if you're Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris usually does better with likely voters instead of registered voters. Again, self-identified likely voters, of course, because we haven't had the election yet. But if we look at the numbers, the initial numbers, we do see some interesting distribution. So if we first look at party identification, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, the Democrat and Republican numbers look about where we expect them to be. However, the independent numbers shows that Kamala Harris is ahead. Now, one disclaimer I want to make that a lot of people don't realize, okay, ideology is moderate. Party identification, or in this case, the lack of a party identification, is independent. They are not synonymous terms. So please don't think of them as synonymous terms, and you'll see why in a second. But in this situation, we see Kamala Harris with a 5% lead amongst those who identify as independents. Now, there has been some trend showing that Kamala Harris is improving amongst independents, because Donald Trump, when he was running against Biden, was always in the lead in this category. So this could be true. This actually seems as if it could be what it is. So yeah. So I say that number is probably going to be pretty spot on. Now, if we go ahead and look at liberal, moderate, conservative, there are a few things here that look a little bit fishy to me, which makes me wonder, does this pass the smell test? The liberal number looks fine, even though I'd say it's probably a little bit more to Kamala Harris, but it looks fine. There's nothing out of whack with it. The conservative number, on the other hand, has 19% of conservatives going to Kamala Harris. I don't see that. Unless these are never-Trumpers, and I don't think never-Trumpers are 19% of conservatives out there. They could be right now, but I think that number is a little bit high. I think if she got the high end of the conservative number, it would be 13% or something. We don't really see her peaking that high. But the main one here is that moderate number. It's 62%. That's just way too high. Kamala Harris has been, for the most part, either losing a little bit or gaining a little bit with moderate voters. There have been some polls, and I even think some New York Times poll that shows her doing substantially better with moderate voters. Now remember, this is pre-convention, not post-convention. It'll be interesting to see what happens post-convention, but I think this number is a little bit too high. I don't think she's doing as well as, a 2 out of 3 lead with moderate voters. I think that number should be a little bit closer. Now, if we go down to age, which is the next big one. The 18 to 30 number seems fine. The 31 to 44 number seems fine also. It's the other two numbers that seem a little bit off. Now, that next one, 45 to 64, that could be true. This has been a demographic that usually those numbers are flipped, that it's not exactly neck and neck, but Donald Trump has a little bit of a lead in this. So to see Kamala Harris up 48 to 44 seems a little bit odd. I would expect that Donald Trump would be up 48 to 44. But it's the 65 and older number that is really the one that's kind of out of whack, with Kamala Harris with a 16% lead. So that's not happening right now. That's not going to happen. This number should be much, much closer than this. Now I will say there have been trends where Kamala Harris is actually doing significantly better with voters 65 and older, but not to an extent where she's winning them by 16%. That's just not the case. So I would say this poll right here, take it with a big grain of salt, but I think overall, even if we make the adjustments, Kamala Harris is up by 3% in this poll. All right, so let's go to the next poll that we have. All right, so the next poll that we have is done in Michigan and shows Kamala Harris up by 2% in Michigan. This was funded by a pro-Trump or pro-conservative PAC. I think it's called American Greatness. And they're actually releasing a poll showing that their person is losing. But there are, even though I like that it says that Kamala Harris is winning, being a Harris supporter myself, there are a lot of problems with this poll. Let's go ahead and delve into those problems right now. So here we do have the poll right here, and we can see it has 1,001 registered voters. But the first thing that we want to do is look at the geographical distribution. So Donald Trump is here, Kamala Harris is here. Let's look at the geographical distribution. The first one that's weird is Detroit, showing that Kamala Harris is winning 56% to Donald Trump's 35%. Now, this is just the city of Detroit because it does have the Detroit suburbs next, which would include the rest of Wayne County and then the counties around that as well. So this is just within the city of Detroit. Now, the problem is here is that Kamala Harris should be winning this 70 to 20 or something like that, with maybe 10% undecided. Okay, this shouldn't even be close to be in the 60s or even in the 50s. So this highly underestimates Kamala Harris's position in the city of Detroit. Now, the Detroit suburbs, having Kamala Harris at 50% to 38%, that seems a little bit more likely. This seems to be, I think, where the electorate probably is. Now, when we start getting to the rural areas, this is where Kamala Harris is actually doing a little bit better than she probably really is doing. So in the north, which I would assume would just be the northern part of the peninsula, the UP, and then the northern part of the southern part of the state, you have Donald Trump with only a 2-point lead. No, he's probably winning this region 60-40. Okay, there are some counties where he's doing well, but he's probably winning this region at minimum 60-40. To say this is a 2-point advantage for Donald Trump is giving Kamala Harris too much strength here. So I don't think that is accurate. Now, the thumb here, again, it's maybe a little bit more accurate as far as the spread is concerned. This is another 60-40 region. So this is part of that. Now, Macomb County, I don't know if they include that in the thumb. I don't know if they include that in the Detroit suburbs. I'm not sure. So that might actually affect how these numbers are. But the spread here is okay. But I would say that this is a little bit more for Donald Trump. And then we get to the West. This again, this spread is okay, I guess. This is a 60-40 region as well. So I think Donald Trump in this part he's not underperforming, but he's actually doing better than this poll says. So the question is, and there are liberal areas there. There are, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, The places along like I think it's called Benton Harbor and stuff like that, those places are more liberal. I think in this situation, we really don't see, I mean, this is all over the place. This geography is all over the place and just doesn't make sense. But in a weird way, all the bad geographical polling data that they have here might balance out in a way that actually gives us a fair overall representation. But as far as looking at it in the crosstabs, it looks like garbage. Now, when we look at the age distribution, though, this is when it gets kind of like weird. Okay, so, I mean, the geography was already weird, but this might be something that's even more weird. Of those 18 to 24, Donald Trump's up by 10. He's not up by 10 with 18 to 24-year-olds. Sorry, that's just not the truth at all. Then we get to 25 to 44-year-olds. We see 47% or 48% to 39% for Donald Trump. We see Kamala Harris winning that group. That makes sense. Then we go 45 to 64. We see Donald Trump plus 4%. That seems right. And then if we look at the 65 and older, we see Kamala Harris. Again, Kamala Harris winning. So I mentioned in that last one, I don't think she's winning by 16%. But we are seeing trends that Kamala Harris is doing significantly better with certain groups of voters. Very young voters, senior voters, Hispanic voters. These are the three groups that Kamala Harris is really, really performing well with. So this is where it gets a little bit crazy as well. Male voters, Donald Trump up by 0.2%. I don't think so. All national polls and other polls shows that he has at least, it's basically a 10% lead for Trump with male voters, 10% lead with female voters for Kamala Harris. Okay. So even this female voter number is a little bit off. And then all of a sudden white voters and see, this one's hard because it says black and Hispanic voters. So when you clump them together, it's kind of hard to really see where that is. But overall, this poll is a bad poll. But the overall, like I said, it's so bad that it's so bad that it actually might be accurate. As odd as that seems, because if you kind of move everything in a different direction, it might give you the overall view of what actually is happening there. But as far as the bullshit meter on this, mine is going really high. This is a very, very bad poll. I wish it were a good poll because it would show Kamala Harris is doing well. Now, another thing that I want to mention too is John Curtis in the state of Utah. We don't really have any crosstabs. He's up by more than 30% in the U.S. Senate race. So this goes to what I say, which is Utah can be a swing state at the presidential level. It's not going to be that at the local level. And I worked in Utah politics for a while. And as a matter of fact, I worked on the first campaign against John Curtis, Kathy Allen, who ran in a special election when Jason Chaffetz decided to leave Congress. So this is what we have here, and the district's not going to change at all. Utah might get more Democratic in the presidential election. We'll see. For Democrats to get over 40% is a huge challenge in a two-way race. It's not going to happen. So just wanted to throw this poll out there. There's just no crosstabs or anything. I just wanted to mention it. Here's some things right here, 56 to 22%. Democrats are probably not going to get that high. I mean, not going to get over 40. All right, so that's it for today. That's just a look at the polls. Hopefully the polls that are the post-convention polls, they're wrapping up their interviews now. Maybe tomorrow, but probably next day we'll get a full view of the post-convention bounce or not. We'll see if there's a bounce. We don't know. On my Substack, please subscribe to my Substack. I wrote about if there's a possibility of the bounce or not. Go ahead and check out that article. But thank you all very much for joining me. Go ahead and subscribe. Hit the bell. I will be doing these every day. Have a nice day from Paris. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.